Hello, everybody, and welcome to Celebrate with L.A. Williams. My name is L.A. Williams, and I am so excited to bring to you this very special episode. Today, we are celebrating the one and only Miss Natasha Sinha. Natasha, how you doing, sister?
Well, there is a Bollywood star named Natasha Sinha, so I'm not the one and only.
Not the one and only, the one and only to me and to us. Welcome, Natasha. Before I get into sort of a deeper introduction of you, I'd like to take a few seconds to talk about what Celebrate is and what it means to me, if that's all right with you.
Please, yes.
So this series is a manifestation of a moment I had as a very young theater student at Alabama State University. It was my first experience in the theater building. I'd gone over to see a play called Phaedra by Jean Racine, and it was directed by Dr. Tommy Stewart. And Natasha, it was that experience for me that was like, oh my God. Mm-hmm. I am bitten by the bug. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. You know, that whole thing where you're just like breaking out in hives. And I had gone to see the show over and over that weekend, matinees, all the things. But the other thing I remember feeling while watching that show was this overwhelming need to say thank you to everybody involved in that production. I was like, I've got to find these people and let them know how they changed my life. And the rest is history. And when I think about it, Natasha, that was the genesis of Celebrate, that moment. You know what I mean? Needing to say thank you. Cut to some years later, I'm living in New York City, and I truly have the divine inspiration to begin this sort of interview platform where I sit down with some of those people and talk to them about their life and their journey and some of the transformative moments in their story. And sort of let them know again how much they mean to me and how much they've inspired me. And here we are, 10 years after starting the interview platform, and I'm still having conversations. And this past fall, as you know well, we are all, pulling through this pandemic and reopening theater and doing all these amazing things. And I made a personal commitment to show up for my people and for my community by going to see shows and just kind of be out there in the world again. And I'm so glad I did, because I've gotten to see some incredible work. And so I decided I wanted to sit down with some of those people like yourself who've been working through this pandemic, right? Who I consider to be heroes. But more specifically about you, Miss Natasha, in the spirit of going back just a little bit, the reason why I wanted to celebrate you today is because I remember when I was assistant directing a show at LCT3, it was directed by the great Patricia McGregor. And you at the time were the associate director there. And what I remember so much about my first encounter with you was simply your presence. Natasha, I remember the day. I remember where I was. And I remember thinking, wow, who is this person who has this clear energy? And I could tell instantly that you loved the work, that you loved what you did, and that you loved artists. And I never forgot that feeling. So every time I see you or think of you, I think about that. And what I've come to know about you over the years, because you've since moved from Lincoln Center, LCT3 to the Signature, and now you're the new associate artistic director at Playwrights Horizon. Congratulations. I also wanted to have you on to say thank you for accepting that position, that appointment, and congratulations to you. The thing, Natasha, that I always once again think about and feel whenever I encounter you is, again, your passion for the work and for artists. And I'm so grateful and thankful for your presence. And when I met you that first time years ago, which is crazy to think that was almost 10 years ago. It's crazy. It's so crazy. I actually felt something very similar, believe it or not, that I felt when I first saw Phaedra. I felt, wow, I felt that energy again. Right. And I've held on to it. So that is the reason for the invitation. I'm so grateful for you, Natasha, and can't wait to sort of hold space for you today and sort of listen to you talk about your journey and let you know that, like, we love you, we see you, and like, I'm just so glad that we're existing at the same time.
This is so beautiful. I mean, it only works as a community, and that was the whole draw to it from the beginning. You know, people who love art and love it together, like in person together for me. So that means everything. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Natasha. Thank you, sister, really. The way I like to start these Celebrate conversations off is by celebrating the day you were born. And I like to ask that or pose that because it gives you the chance to take us back to however far you want us to go, to wherever you want us to go. Talk to us about your birth story, your earliest memory, growing up as a young child, anything you want us to know.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I was born in Queens to my parents who had just gotten an arranged marriage in the year prior. They were new to this country. My mom was in Canada for a smidge, and my dad was in Long Island, and they settled in Long Island. My mom actually my mom's family sent a photo of her and a tape of her singing, because she has the most beautiful voice of all time, to my dad. My dad loves music. And that is key because as I was growing up as a kid, I was told that I would be a doctor. I should be a doctor. I'm a smart kid. Therefore, I should be like a good Indian doctor. I was a little artsy kid, you know. I was a weirdo in the corner with a book, or, you know, plunking out songs on the piano, eventually playing the violin, also like writing some stuff along the way when I was like a teenager. That was like the real me. And for a long time, I felt like, oh, this isn't really what I'm supposed to be doing as me. But then I think back to even that story, actually, and I'm like, well, music and storytelling and a love for art are actually in my blood. My parents just, you know, they grew up at a time and in a way, and with this move across the planet, that now for them to really dig into that side of themselves. It was more about survival and more about like making a new home on the other side of the world from everything they knew for their future family with a person that they're just getting to know. Like, that is a life I will never know, and I can imagine, but there are parts I will never understand. And yet it feels so linked to, like, because of what they did, I can do what I'm doing. There are all the other barriers that we could talk about that I'm sure will come up. I'm not trying to make a life in theater, off Broadway especially, and in the segment of history, of theater history, that I am landing in, that we're both in now. But even just to be able to do that at all feels like a total gift, and something that I'm so grateful that I'm able to follow. And I try to like remind myself of that on the days when I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Why am I doing this? Can I go to bed? Am I ever gonna be able to do my laundry this week? Like, on those weeks, I'm just like, well, my whole life, my whole career right now revolves around these artists and new works, and telling stories, and how to find ways into stories that, you know, we haven't heard before, not in those ways. So that feels like it actually does connect back to the question you're asking, which no one's ever really asked me before. And I never really thought about it in that way of being like, well, I was born in Queens, blah, blah, blah. But it feels formative in a way that I couldn't know until much later.
Well, that's good, Natasha. So talk to me a little bit more about the sort of structure of your household. I'm always fascinated by like how, like, what was the everyday life? Did you have siblings? What kind of things did y'all do every day? You mentioned like you would like plunk on the piano and like read books, but just like, what was it like being in the household with you and your family?
Yeah, I'm the eldest, and I have a younger sister and then a younger brother. And we lived in Long Island. You know, really didn't have much money, and especially in the early days. And then my father is a great businessman and basically started a whole agency revolving around helping folks in like the healthcare world based in their own languages in Queens, which was a need that was sorely needed. So it took off. And so my experience of growing up in that house really changed from like when I was like a kid through when I left for college. I went to Barnard. So I was nearby, but I was still leaving the house. And so growing up, it was very much me reading books, me being by myself, me not really having many friends, because I was just a strange person who wanted to talk about the stuff that is outside of small talk, that is a little dangerous, a little scary, a little weird, a little unknown. The questions that aren't really meant to have answers, but are just meant to start a conversation. I want to do that. And I found it hard to find those people. Part of it was where I was, but also part of it was that I was incredibly shy. I mean, I was terrified of everything, which is why you would often find me like hiding in a closet with a book. Because those characters didn't, you know, need me to be good at like talking and holding a conversation. They just wanted me to like be engaged in this entire story and pull something from it. And then that sort of exercise that I didn't realize I was doing constantly of seeing a story having my own life and connecting them, and finding my way into them, feels like it sort of formed me. So that's what I'd be doing. I mean, I had a lot of extracurricular activities, you know, like immigrant family, put them in all the classes, all the things, make them good at things. So I did a lot of that. Again, I was very like science and math and like STEM oriented in the beginning, because I was told to be, not really because I had not because I was really drawn to it. Although math I was really into, and I think that was connected to the musical side of me. But because I played piano since I was 4, and then I started violin when I was 8. And that was like my thing. I was like concert mistress at the orchestra. I like asked for all the solos and I got them all because I was the only one who was practicing, and I got like all county orchestras, that kind of thing. And I loved all of that. But it felt like extracurriculars for sure. So I did all my homework. I did all things I'm supposed to do, but then all the rest of my time was jam-packed with taking in stories mostly. And this is going to make me sound so old the way I put that. I never know quite how to put this, but the internet was like being born. And so this was like access into communities that are not just in my little Long Island town. And, you know, my parents, some of their brothers and sisters settled in the area on my dad's side. So that was a family that we saw, but to be honest, we didn't go out. We didn't like socialize much outside of that either as a family. And I really wanted to connect with other people and find out what people are thinking about, again, the like hard, weird stuff. So I would do that like online in the early versions of like AOL chat rooms or whatever. Found a lot of like theater dorks there that I ended up talking to, some of whom I'm like real friends with now, many years later. So that was kind of my life, was a lot of extracurriculars, was a lot of music, was listening to music, being an emo kid on my own, writing things up, and spending nights, especially starting in middle school, got really hard. And I basically read a book a night because I read fast too. And so that was always being sort of channeled into my brain, were all these stories. And this way, and it was, you know, it was escapism for sure. It was a way of not feeling like I needed to have anything in my own life, I guess. And that I could live vicariously through these characters and understand different perspectives through these characters. And it was just because I love reading, and I love all the art forms really. And so, yeah. And then just dreaming of going to New York City was the thing, because my dad, so at the time he ran a medical office for basically all of his brothers who were the doctors there. He's from a huge family of 11 kids. And basically there wasn't enough money to send him to school by the time it got down to him. He's one of the younger ones. So, but he has great social skills, which the others don't really have. So he became the like face of the office, which I think I do, even though I also didn't connect that until much later. I think I do get that from him a bit. But he, you know, he would talk to all sorts of people who are bringing in medications or supplies or things that they want to sell to the office, and a way that they would get him to use their materials versus someone else's was to give him Broadway tickets. Like literally that was the thing. And that seemed so American dream to him, to just like go with his family to a Broadway show, that he went. And we mostly went to musicals because, again, he and my mom loved music and they didn't really understand plays. And I think you need to understand the language like more deeply, especially at that time, to get it. But I went and I totally fell for it. But I didn't see myself in it. I mean, I absolutely fell for theater the second I went, but like I could not imagine myself there because there was no one to imagine myself in. There's no one like at all similar to me in any way. So it was still that abstraction of like, okay, you're a person who has nothing in common with me, but I love this. Weird. I guess I'll be a doctor who goes to plays on the weekends. I couldn't even imagine past that, which is like why I do this and why when last week tell my story or whatever, I'm a little bit like, oh, who cares? It's just my story. But then I'm like, maybe it'll help another person know that that I'm here, first of all, because I'm not an actor or a playwright or director. So
Come
I'm
on now.
these, you know,
Yes,
but
yes,
like, I think we need a lot of people behind the scenes. I
yes.
want to be the only, like, luckily, like, things are really starting to change now, but it's going to take some time. Whenever I meet with someone younger than me, I'm like, can you age more quickly so I can work with you more?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, Natasha, that's so good and juicy. Already so many connections that I'm making in my brain just listening to you talk through that. I love hearing about your sort of musical roots and playing instruments and things like that. And then also like you going to see musicals, because I've gotten the sense over the years that you really love musicals and that you're involved with organizations like the Musical Theater Factory. So just again, a connection that I'm like, oh, nice. You mentioned American Dream, and I want to hear you talk just a little bit about what it was like being a part of an immigrant family in America in Long Island. Like, paint that up for us a little bit.
Yeah, it was a lot of like, you work hard enough and you'll get there. And in America, you can get whatever you want. You just have to work for it. And I bought that for a long time. I have so many feelings about this country at this point, and for quite a while now. But growing up in it, it was very much, I grew up in a town where honestly, there were a lot of Jewish folks, and I didn't even know that this country is not mostly Jewish until like middle school, because that's who I was surrounded by. I would get invited to like Seders, and like I would see the menorahs and what like that wasn't, there was a lot that was, again, this was a time before the internet was really a thing. Like I couldn't like research everything at the drop of a hat. I feel like we're so used to Googling anything now, which is both amazing and also a little sad to me.
Exactly. Same. Yep.
Totally. But at the time it was like, I'm curious about all these things, but I don't have the answers. And my parents are like newer here too, so they don't quite know all those things either. So it felt, honestly, it felt like very lonely, because I was like a strange person in my family who loved art and storytelling and all of that, and asking questions that no one else wanted to go near. But then when I would be in school or in these other spaces, I was like the quiet little brown girl, and that's it. And there weren't other, I mean, the people in my family, some of them went to this school, so like there were cousins and things like that I was friends with, but there weren't really other people to be friends with, and that caused me to sort of go inside myself even more. And yeah, I don't know. It was lonely, and I was waiting to get to the next thing, honestly. That was kind of the whole vibe of my childhood and adolescence. And it got more turbulent as I got older. I was like, get me out of here. I need to be near like culture and like people who want to talk about different views on something. People who don't want to define everything by one thing, which is also where theater became a little bit of a heartbreak, because theater does that too,
Yes, yeah,
from like a different direction.
Totally.
And that feels like a lot of my experience in general is often caught between different extremes and not really feeling like I'm part of any of them. But also I've learned really kind of leaning into that tension space, and trying to make it into a bridge.
Yes, Natasha. Yes. God, sorry, I feel that in my body. I feel that in my body.
I've talked about this before too.
Yes, I feel that in my body, in my soul. Thank you for that. It's so real, leaning into that tension space. I
was afraid of it for a long time, and I was trying to be like, I'm totally this thing. Oh wait, no, I'm totally this other thing, because I thought that was the only thing I could be. And then finally I was like, wait, if I understand myself enough and I acknowledge the stuff that I just don't understand and love that instead, I can exist in this space more deeply and let it take me where it needs to take me. Let it be a superpower instead of something that feels like an obstacle.
Yes, Natasha. Listen, you're not gonna send me through today, okay? You about to make me like, I'm gonna log off in a second because I'm already so full. Because that's so real and profound, and it's just deep. It's so deep. And it's profound because we're not, I don't want to go into it. You know why it's profound. I know why it's profound. And if we don't know, I could, listen, it's so good. That's so juicy. So high school, adolescence, did you go to like so I have two questions rolled in one. When did you start sort of acting as an artist? Like, I know that you were like sort of eating the books and the stories and sort of, getting all that inside you. But was there, did you do a school play in middle school or something and you're like, oh my God? Or I mean, were you involved in that kind of way? And did you go to like a fancy performing arts high school? Like, what were those sort of high school years like in terms of like your artistry and being an artist?
Totally. And, if I like time traveled back to high school and showed them this interview, they'd be like, Natasha took a bunch of AP science courses. She's not an artist. That's not what she does. Even though that's what I soaked up constantly. And musically, I mean, I played piano and violin all the time. I mean, there was a brief moment when I thought I would go to like a conservatory and pursue that. But I think I realized that the purity of just music was something that I loved so deeply. And if I couldn't do it perfectly, it would destroy me. And there's something about the like embedded imperfection of theater that I kind of loved.
Yeah.
Felt more human to me in terms of doing it myself. But so my high school was like a very good academically public high school in Long Island. Lots of wealthy folks who made me feel a certain way, both directly and indirectly. There were all those tough years that's all I could think about. I never thought I would escape it. It was hard. And they had really good classes, and that was good in terms of being like, okay, this will give me more of a ticket out of here. So that was kind of where I was at. And in terms of art at the school and theater specifically, theater felt a bit cliquey to me. I'm not sure at this point, even if that was actually true in my school, or if I was just so terrified and like in a bad place and in a place of like, I need space to find myself. And I have not been able to do that at all, not even to the point most teenagers can at that, at that age. So it could have just been me just not in a good space to be able to enter in. But I was in all the musical, music, orchestra, chorus, that kind of thing. And then I played in like the pit orchestras for musicals at the school. But I actually am a person who has never acted on a stage. I mean, in no like bigger way, even in terms of like school roles. That was a thing that terrified me, and was also why I was like, well, I'm clearly not a theater person, because I don't want to get up on that stage and be in the spotlight. Like my ring lights that my friend so kindly gave me are here right now, and I'm slightly like, this is not me. Can someone else like sub in for me, and I'll just Yeah. Like not my vibe. But that's also because you don't get taught, or at least back then, at least for me, I heard nothing about what a producer was,
right?
Or dramaturg, especially.
Right. Oh my God.
Or like what like literary management was even at that point. I'm very happy to know that a lot of that is really changing, because I hear younger folks come to me now and they're like, I want to be a dramaturg and producer. And I'm like, you're 15, you know what those are?
Right. I know, right? I know, yeah.
And I'm like, I love that, because my whole life would have changed if I know those things.
Absolutely.
Literally.
Absolutely, literally, yeah.
In a way that I'm not sure that means I would be like a better version of myself right now, or if I would just do a totally different thing, because that would impact me in a different way. Because I do sort of like honor everything that came before, because it led me here, and I'm like grateful for being here, and I'm happy with myself and like where I'm at now. But I do wonder what would happen if I did know those things earlier, because I absolutely did not. And I was a person who, again, going back to the internet, that was like a real thing for me at the time. Other people who don't live right here. And I would go on like playbill.com and read every article that came out. And at the time, it wasn't a million articles and a lot of like extra content and stuff. It was really just like articles about readings happening, workshops happening, getting to know the directors who are coming up, getting to know new writers who have readings coming up. And I'm a total dork and love like color coordinated organization, whatever. So I would like make spreadsheets and be like, these are the people who are coming up, and pretend I was in this world, not knowing that there are people who literally need to do that.
Exactly, literally.
And that gave me a really good understanding of all of it. And I just had a knack for pulling all that together, which happened in the college years when I did internships and like got grants to do different things. And people who I worked for were surprised that I knew as much as I did about the new play landscape, because I just, in my very dorky way, just like sort of dove into it for years.
Yeah.
So that's really what I did. But in terms of being part of it in the high school years, I was just like, I'm clearly not meant for this. No one wants me here. I'm not supposed to be here. Again, these are all things that I'm like horrified by, and it's why I talk about it now, so that no one else will ever think that again.
Yeah.
But I, to say it outright, like I just didn't see like brown people even on stage.
That's right. Come on now.
Easiest way to do it.
That's right. That's right. That's
put actors in there, because like you can just write, like anyone could write a show and need those bodies in the stage. And of course, that's often what happens. A lot of people who maybe don't need to be writing those stories and maybe make way for other writers.
Exactly.
But there's lots of different roles that could be happening. And I didn't know about the roles, and I didn't anyone who looked remotely like me, so I didn't have any encouragement towards it. But I wanted it badly. And once I got to college, I went to Barnard in the city. And literally I sabotaged some of my college applications to end up in New York City because I wanted to see theater.
Yeah.
The whole reason, which feels very irresponsible of me, which is not who I was, especially as a child and like a teenager. So part of me is like, what was behind that? Was I just like losing my mind, or what was going on? Because it didn't quite align with me, but that's what I did. I ended up at Barnard, obviously a good school. I studied music and psychology and English. Still not theater, still felt, I did some theater things in the beginning, but it felt again, very much like this is not for me. So that's when I started trying to do like internships and fellowships and those sorts of things in the city alongside being in school, to just be directly in that world, in the like professional world of it. And in the beginning, it was really just for fun. It was really like, I want to read more new scripts than anyone else I know. I want to be that asshole who's like, I know more.
Exactly.
Like, the whole reason I'm in theater is for that like asshole impulse. But, I was like, I read fast and I love this shit. So like, give them to me. I want to read them. So I followed these positions. Like the first one was at an agency, a lit agency, where they literally didn't even have a chair for me to sit down in. So they were like, just wait in the mailroom and we'll let you know when you have to copy a script. Copying scripts was still a thing then, instead of just like printing them. And I was like, okay, great. Thank you. Just let me know. I'm so happy to copy your script for you. And they're like, yeah, and you can read whatever you want in there if you want. And I ended up reading everything in the mailroom, and someone found out and asked me like about some of the plays. Like they didn't believe that I read all of them. And I was like, I read all these. I will tell you about each and every one of them if you'd like. Do you have time? And then they realized that, and then they gave me more scripts. Then they gave me like specific scripts to read. And then they asked me to write it up. And that was sort of the beginning of coverage. Anyone who might be watching this at any point, if you're a person who wants to work on the artistic side of theater at all, find the opportunities to write coverage, to write your thoughts about a script, about, strengths and weaknesses, sure, but also just observations, reflections, ways of describing it that are really multifaceted, and really generous, and really honest, and that really connect back to your own lens, but also to the lens of the place you might be working. It's a great muscle to sort of develop. And they don't always align, and that's okay. But just going through the exercise of it is something that'll help you articulate what you're thinking about a given work, which is a skill that you'll need no matter what, even if it takes a couple of years to get there, great, use the time and do this. Because not only do you get to develop that skill by kind of like by yourself, although I would say try to find someone who can read it for you and like give you feedback. Feel free to come to me if this is something you love. But also you just get to know a lot of new scripts, and it's just so fun and really exciting to know what's out there. And that's what really got me a little bit like enraged, because I was like, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Why isn't this on those stages? I don't understand why this is not landing on these stages. So that kept fueling me. And to be honest, those college gigs that I did, they were sort of like for fun, but then that got me really, that's what made me want to like really do this, be in theater professionally and be a voice behind all this. Cause I was like, wait a minute, I know more about myself now. I'm learning myself. I know how to do this, and I know how to connect it to the different organizations I'm working at, and to be that bridge, hopefully. So that's sort of where that led.
Ooh, Natasha, first of all, there's so much in there. Thank you so much for speaking candidly about, ooh, child, so much. Just about how there was no education for any of us around anything other than, the way I see it, is acting on stage. If you weren't an actor, there was not even a lot of talk about being a director. I didn't know what a director was for a very long time. So thank you for like bringing that into the space and really talking about it, and also sharing this wisdom, sharing what you've learned and your experience, and sort of giving us the gift of like, this is how you do that. And I also just want to celebrate the fact that you, knowingly or unknowingly, were sort of self-teaching and getting yourself prepped and practiced for what you do now. I just love that by what I hear, by following your instincts and your passion and your love for the work and what you just enjoy doing, right? Not knowing that you'd become who you are today. But I love all of that. There's so much that I could tease out in there. Thank you so much for talking me through sort of after high school into Bar Nerd and that whole nine. And I also love the connection of you being like, something you said earlier about like, I wanted to get to New York City. I wanted to like meet people, and like, then that decision to, you know, go to college here, like it all is connected, obviously. If there's one other thing that I want to tease out before we move to sort of after college, undergrad, I'm curious if you feel like your parents would have allowed you to do theater a day before you decided it. If you had decided in high school, I want to be an actor or whatever, would that have been a thing, or were they still on the sort of STEM sort of path?
Yeah. I like basically had a bit of a meltdown one weekend in senior year. Senior year is when you write your college essay, right? Yeah, I think so. I wrote a college essay. I had to write a college essay for like an English class or something, right? It was supposed to be like a draft of what you would write to help you learn how to do that thing of writing that sort of essay. And this was in this time in my life when I would regularly be up until 3 or 4 in the morning, and then go to orchestra rehearsal at 6:45, and not get very much sleep in general. But I spent like 2 days straight writing this essay about how I had to follow art. I couldn't be a doctor, and I had to follow art. And I didn't tell anyone I was writing this, and it was terrifying because up until that point, it was still very much, sure, I have all these feelings, but I'm still going to med school. So like that is going to be what I'm doing. But just this is also, it feels very specific, informative, and like intentional. The way it happened is, it was literally through writing over the course of 2 days that I was able to articulate for myself what I needed, what I wanted, and to keep myself from going down this path where I was going to be miserable. I was miserable for a lot of high school, and it was because I didn't know how to navigate all these different forces. And, you know, like my parents went through so much to come here, and so much they've done so much for me. And it wasn't until later that I could connect it to like, they did what they did, and now I need to do, because they want me to do what I can do, what I want to do, and to do something differently, and to be able to live a different way. And this is what it actually is. They may not even know that yet, because they're going through their process. They never got to go through, like, I mean, their parents also, most of their parents were gone by the time they were here. So like they had so much less than I had. And so of course they weren't able to go through that yet. But by the time I got to that weekend, when I was like, I gotta tell them now, like, this is big and I'm the eldest and they have so much, it feels like so much is riding on me, but I have to, because I don't know how I'm gonna like continue my life. Like I need it so bad. And I didn't know anything else, honestly. That was kind of it. Small side anecdote, I would sneak into the city in high school. My parents now know this. And Raul Esparza was an actor who I just absolutely loved at the time. I was like, he's so smart and digging into so many different like complex parts of a process and of like the psyche of a character in a really deep way. And he was a person who would show up at like stage doors. So in this way of you talking about like wanting to celebrate the things that gave you your fuel, that's why I would show up at those stage doors. But I was the, again, the weird child who would be like, I'd like to talk about the background of how you built this character and what the story is. And he would talk to me about it. And one day I showed up at some stage door to him and watched a reading of this new musical that he was in. And it like broke me in the moment, because it was about a person who is dealing with the weight of pressures on him and not knowing how to sort of let that go when it felt like what he was supposed to do. And I was basically in tears at the stage door telling him about this and how much it meant to me, because I wanted to do this now. Like, I don't want to be a doctor, but I'm supposed to be a doctor. He said in many interviews how his family really wanted him to be a lawyer. And we had like this heart to heart. And he was like, if this is the only thing you can do, you have to do it. And if there's anything else, do that, because this is hard and there's no clear way forward. But that was such an honest and real articulation from a person I so respected that I was like, okay, I get it. It is a hard thing to do, but if I want it this badly, I just have to do it. Great. That's all I needed, was for a person to tell me that. And for the person who comes from like a Cuban family and like to talk about his whole thing, I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. So I say that to be like, I think that's why in that moment, that weekend, after writing that essay, I sat down with my parents, and it was hard many years, and they didn't quite get it in the beginning, but they wanted to make sure I was okay. They were scared because I'd never like communicated anything like that before, and that honestly and passionately and deeply, and where the stakes felt so high. So they were terrified, I think, because they were probably like, how is she going to build a life for herself? Being a doctor is very clear, it's hard, but it's a clear path. And I was choosing a hard and unclear path. Right. So that was really difficult. And at the time they were pretty resistant, but I think part of them also knew that I was going to do what I needed to do because I'm a smart person and because of all the reasons that they think I would be a good doctor. Those same they couldn't steer me in like wrong direction,
That's right.
So yeah, so it was hard, but they love it all now. And they still don't quite understand what like a producer and a dramaturg do, but who does really? So
exactly. Oh my God, that's so good, Natasha. I love it. So what happened after undergrad? Did you go to grad school? Did you get a job? What did you do?
I wanted to go to grad school so bad, but couldn't figure out like money stuff. And I was like, okay, I just went 4 years to school to study music, psych, and English. Like my parents are going to be like, what? Huh? You need more of that?
You need more of that? Yeah.
What will that be? So I was like, okay, I'll figure out grad school later then. I had done a couple like internships for school credit and like with grants and whatever during college. And so I had some, I'd spoken to folks within the theater industry at this point, and worked with some of them. And so I was like, great, I'm just going to get a job where I get to read a lot of scripts. And now I'm going to go ham, like even more than before. I'm going to be like just drowning out everyone around me and reading more scripts and articulating better everything that I can until it gets me into a position where that I like genuinely want. And so my first job actually right after college was with Mark Subius. when he was still running a little agency out of his studio apartment in Alphabet City, which was nuts. Like my parents knew where I was every day working. They'd be like, what are you doing? It's like, it involved walking his dog and taking out recycling, paying the Con Ed bill, like setting up a million meetings, like sending contracts out at the right time, helping with all sorts of organizational things, right? But Mark, you know, is a person that I will forever love. He was a really hard boss, and he also taught me so much about the industry because I wanted to know it, and because he and I had very similar like aesthetic taste in plays. He just wanted to educate me and like tell me things and send me off to shows, and I was like, I will soak it all up. I want all of this because I know all of it is going to be like tools in my toolbox to bring to the next thing that I will have. And I will say I was able to do that internship that paid me in a MetroCard and pastries when I wanted them, and a theater ticket I wanted. Which, I mean, that was literally how, that was currency to me at that point. It was like theater tickets. So, you know, it's the time of your life when you're eating like $1 ramen every night.
Exactly.
So it was fine, but I could only do it for 10 months. And then from there, I went to a mid-size agency, to Brett Adams, where I was a agent's assistant again, but this time for like an actual salary. And it was a bigger agency. And at the time they repped Sarah Rule, who I was like, you know, I was like a young woman in theater at that time. Of course, I was obsessed with Sarah Rule. And that was amazing. And they had also just done the Adding Machine musical. I didn't know that they repped those writers, but in my interview, they asked me something about musicals, and I just rambled about Adding Machine, having just seen it, and so musically complex in a way that I love for musicals to be. I'm like, if this is a story on stage, why does it need music, and why this music? There's so many different kinds of music, so many like ways into that. What is this? And this one felt like it had a specific answer to all of that. And it also worked well with one another, with the other layers of storytelling. So anyway, talked about that a ton. I was really into it. So in all these steps, I'm following artists. The first one, I was following really Will Eno, who had Tom Paine Based on Nothing happen at one of the internships I was in college. And I mean, as like, you know, he's a person who plays with language in a way that I was like, this is speaking to like my poetic heart. And Mark rep Will. And in my interview for that, I went on and on about Will. And he was like, do you know Will? And I was like, I'm obsessed with this. I would like this job right now, please. So I just kept following artists, these agencies, right? I didn't want to be an agent, but I knew that agencies held so many scripts. They were just like a total goldmine of new scripts. That's where they went. They got printed off those printers, and the hot pages were right there. And I was the one who had to like bind them in some weird ass, like whatever. I hated it and always like got caught and whatever. At the end of the day, I could do a sneaky extra copy and bring it home with me on the train and read it myself. And then the next day magically be able to join a conversation among people who work there in higher positions and genuinely be part of it because of that, and because of building my knowledge about like who else is on the scene, what theaters are doing, what theater might have a slot available. So even though that wasn't my job at all, I could weasel my way into it because I knew the material. Kept following that, but then ultimately I was at CAA, and that one was tough because it was a 9:30 to 7:30 day, which meant I missed 7 o'clock and 7:30 curtains, and most of the time 8 o'clock curtains. I had to finish it up at the end of the day, and I was like, I can't continue with this one because that was really hard for me to not be able to stay abreast of everything that was happening in theater. And then I was a little burnt out because yes, I loved all of this stuff, but it was incredibly exhausting to have to feel like you had to do more work than everyone else there just to drown them out and be seen as a person who should be talked to, because I was surrounded by, I'll just say it, like a lot of friendly white folks
Mm-hmm.
who, some of them were fine. Some of them were really great. And
Mm-hmm.
others were like, I was a little bit like, how did you get here? You had to
Mm.
do an ounce of what I did.
Come on now.
But then either way, with any of these groups of white folks that were there, I still felt like no matter what, I had to read more, say more, do more, prove more, that like this space can actually talk about new plays too.
Right.
Like just because I don't summer with you or know your best friend or whatever, I can talk about plays, and
That's
actually you
right.
probably want this lens and this
That's
perspective.
right. That's right.
Um,
Mm.
and why can't we connect over that? Like, why is
Mm-hmm.
it suddenly about your friends and your summer vacations and whatever? So, but
Mm.
I did it because I did love reading, and I was in that time in my life when I could do it, and it was a very different time than now. I feel like I have this conversation with younger folks now, and they're like, "No, you shouldn't have done that." And part of me is like, I understand that, and yes, I could have used an easier time. My 20s were completely sacrificed to theater. I didn't do anything in my personal life like at all.
Mm.
Um, so I totally believe that, but also for me at least, and in that time, I did want it too, and I did
Mm-hmm.
benefit from it, like kind of clearly, like that. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
part of why I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
got the positions I got. So yeah, so that was just hard. But after those agencies, I was burnt out, and I knew that Barrington Stage was hiring like an artistic assistant, the assistant to the artistic director.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, that's a way for me to get into a theater without having to do like an internship that is unpaid, that I
Mm-hmm.
can't do now because I need to pay
Mm-hmm.
rent in order to be in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to go there. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be part of the theater on the artistic staff. I knew some things they were doing, and so I was like, okay, I have some sort of leg up there, and that was from reading all those scripts from before.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it always comes back to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so I was there for a summer thinking, okay, I'm going to be here for the summer, and then I'm going to come right back to the city, because the summer is a time that's so dead in theater anyway that it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go to Barrington as the assistant, and that was a job that was so nuts. And I mean, it was like 24 hours a day working, but I learned so much, and I got to sort of become myself there, because suddenly there was an orbit of artists around me, and really great ones, because like so many New York City folks, not that New York City has the only like great artists, but there is a large density of them here. And they're not really in the city over the summer. Most of the time they go out into like the Berkshires and whatever. So there were a lot of great folks. And I was the assistant to the artistic director, who is extremely busy, and she like makes everything happen in that whole town. So she doesn't have time for everyone's individual answers. So I became the person everyone went to for everything. Everyone else had like a show or a department that they belonged to. I didn't, which again felt like that lonely place. But I had so much information and I could help all of them. And that helped me develop relationships with all of them. And it felt like the first time I was like really myself, it like ever really, to be among all those artists and helping all of them and guiding them and decide, like proposing ideas for ways processes could go, or different artists that could work together, or like ways of problem solving something to like enable the best creative energies. I love that, all of that. And then at the end of that summer, Julie Boyd, the AD, was like, will you stay and be the associate producer of this theater with me? And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah. Can you like show me what it is to be a producer? And she's like, it's what you've been doing all summer, Natasha. Go deal with that right now. I gotta go. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, great. And so then I stayed there as producer for a bit, always wanting to come back, but I didn't come back until Paige Evans called me from LCT3 when she finally was able to hire someone. I had met her when I was in my Subius days. Again, it was one of those meetings that he was able to put together for me, which I'm so grateful for, because everything I packed into my brain came out in that meeting. I think in some way to her, she knew I was a person who could talk about new plays in a way that she needed. And when she had an opportunity, she called me about it. And that started my like off Broadway New York City life. Yeah.
Whew. I love it, Natasha. I love listening to you talk about your journey, literally. And also I'm just so, and I don't know how to say this yet, but I keep thinking about it. I'm just so fucking grateful for you and for the work that you have put in to be where you are.
Oh,
and hearing you talk about how that started way back as a young girl in the closet with the book, right? It's making me, what's coming up for me, Natasha, is just how, oh, and you've already touched on this so beautifully, like how much we have to do just to be in the room, and what we do that people don't even know about, right? So I'm really just, I'm thinking about all that. And I just want to say, I see it, I feel it. It oozes out of you in this moment. It oozes out in your story as you talk through it. And yeah, there's really just a thank you. I'm just saying thank you. I'm just saying thank you for all the years, even before college, right? Even during college, even going and back and forth to see the shows. Because I think that we sometimes forget that as much as we love what we do, it's still work. It's still work. So I'm saying thank you for putting in that work. Speaking of the work, you know, we're in a place now where you're in a place where you're the associate artistic director of Playwrights Horizons. I don't really have a question for you as much as I just want to say, again, like I said earlier, congratulations on that appointment. And, you know, thank you for the work that you're already doing. And I just want to hold some space for you around that and celebrate that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's like a total dream. This whole theater world has so many complicated truths about it, but this is a theater that does all new work, all new plays and all new musicals. And musicals, again, like you were saying before, like musicals are really my gateway drug into theater. And then like the weird new musicals are my fave. And like in a funny way, a lot of the theaters that I worked at, but I worked at LCT3, at Lincoln Center Theater, and then Signature, and now here. And you know, those were theaters that largely did new plays. And so in my freelance life, because I was always like restless and wanting to do more, musicals felt like the thing that were very easily not going to be a conflict of interest in any way. But it's created this funny thing where some people think of me as entirely a musical person and other people think of me as entirely a play person. Again, it's like another version of two things that I'm not one or the other. I actually am both of those things. And I love the interaction between the two communities, actually. And there's so much potential there. That's a whole other story. But you know, that's what brought me into everything. And Playwrights Horizons is a place that I connect with like some of my favorite shows from the past, you know, like whether they're ones that I never got to see, like Sunday in the Park with George was one that, I mean, that piece, when I found it as a teenager and I found like Sondheim as a teenager, I was like, this is a person who's really smart and a really complex brain, saying something that is worth dedicating your life to. Because I was in that moment of struggle of like not really knowing if this is something that I could dedicate my whole life to, or if it's like an extracurricular, right? And he's someone who showed me the depth of that, even in musicals. And then like, you know, everything that sort of came after for Playwrights Horizons too. I mean, and that includes more recent stuff like Mr. Burns, for example. Obsessed. Familiar, Denai's play. Which is like, I mean, I laughed so hard at the end of that first act and I cried so hard at the end of the second act. And I was like, what is this play about? Like this Zimbabwean American family is like, that's not, I'm not Zim, but my family has so much in common with this family. And this is what I want of theater, is to see a huge swath of kinds of people, kinds of stories, ways into those stories. Not so that I see my specific one necessarily every single day. That sounds actually incredibly boring to me. But to instead see a lot of different kinds of stories and storytellers and storytelling, so that we can constantly move around this like experience of being a human being, which you can't do when there's a narrow subset of whatever. And I feel like that is possible at Playwrights because every single show also is a new play, which is like, or new musical, which is my dream. I feel like I can finally sort of like come out as a person who only wants to work on new plays and new musicals, because revivals are just not a thing I can like enter into as a person working on them. I appreciate them, they are, but like if I could choose, I would not work on revivals at all. And now that's where I'm at. So very excited about that. And just about like this next era of it with Adam Greenfield, who's a person who's also been like on the landscape for so long and such a generous soul, and a person who's beloved by artists and has put in the work also. I mean, he and I share a lot of stuff actually. And so being able to do that with him and with our, like we have an incredible staff. I love my artistic staff, and it's just like, it's a place where I'm hoping it takes some time, you know, and especially in a global pandemic to start this job is bizarre, so insane, and not what I expected. And it's slow going. And I constantly need to remind my very passionate antsy self to like be patient and remind myself that the whole world is like changing in like a really, really big ways. And so this may take different kind of time to settle into place. I'm so excited about our next season. And there's also though, like I don't know, there's so many, I have so many like ideas and documents about ideas that I'm ready to bring in, but we're all still healing from this thing that's going on. And that's going to be happening for a long time, but I feel like we're in a major state of it right now that I don't want to also bring in a new idea that might be a burden and might be really difficult to actually implement well for the sake of the artists. We can do it in a way that is like a cool experiment for us. We can do it in a way where my staff goes nuts, but like, I think we've learned to take care of people, hopefully. And so that means maybe a pacing of these ideas that's a little bit slower as I also learn this theater better. Because it's really wild to me. You know, I've been at a couple theaters now, and usually within a couple weeks, I'm like in it because some show is happening, and I can understand and learn the theater through that show. I can have a million meetings with everyone on staff about how these processes work, which I kind of did during the pandemic, but I still won't know what really works, what's really the gap, what's really the thing that we need to find a way to forge until I'm in it. We've now this season started producing again, of course, but every single show feels a little bit like an anomaly, partially because of whatever COVID wave we're in, perhaps in some huge way. But also, these are shows that have been programmed for a while, since before me. I have relationships with a lot of the artists. Dave Harris's Tambo and Bones is one I was working on since Ojai, and love that play, and it drives me nuts when people don't see it as what it is, which is this incredible like articulation of where we're at right now in the most theatrical way, asking every question you could ask with every line of it. It's like, and so I love all that, but these are all plays that were with the theater for so long. And there's something about the way that we produce, and maybe even just the way that we live with these stories in theater, that isn't really meant for a 2+ year process of building without doing it. And so I'm hoping we're doing well by these artists, and also looking forward to starting like fresh with the next season, and then especially beyond that for when we can like build for whatever the next era of our theater is, at least. And hopefully all theater, because I think that all theaters are sort of on a landscape and should all work together. But that can be hard in, you know, late stage capitalism and et cetera, et cetera.
Come on now. Listen, I thank you for all of that, Natasha. And it's not lost on me that, and it's a part of why I wanted to have this conversation with you, that you have begun this position at this time in our history and in this world that we're in today. And to that point, I want to ask you, how can we as a community best support you in this new role at this time? I'm curious about how we can take care of our leaders.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the community of like folks of color trying to uplift one another and people who love art within that umbrella, I'm always like, I think the sort of zeitgeist is very different now than when I was starting out, right? Like this is a conversation that is happening. Is it happening in a sort of circular way? Is it happening in a way that's not always connected to action? Totally. But at least the conversation is somewhere, very different than when it was when I was starting out. And I really want to be able to talk about the art, the aesthetic behind it, the approach to it, the reason for it, on artistic terms, like all the time with folks within that umbrella, because I feel like a lot of the time that becomes the definition of us in some way. And it's like that alone is kind of the most offensive. It's like every Indian American person you meet is not going to be me. Like God for them. But like, it's we're individuals with a shared cultural context that's very different than, there's something about representation that always, I don't know, rubs against me the wrong way, because I'm not sure I can fully represent an entire community. I think we just expect something like that because there's literally nothing out there yet. And therefore any drop of that gives us some information. And then suddenly we apply that to every other person we meet who shares that thing in common. That's so wild to me. That's such a weird idea to me. And I am just like so interested in complicating that and making sure that none of us are defined by any one part of us, unless we want to be, I guess. But like for me, all of my identities feel like ingredients that make me, wouldn't be without them. And they, sort of steer my life in different ways for sure. But that's about me. Then it's like, I've got desires and like tastes and whatever that got shaped in interaction with all of those. But not entirely by one thing. And so what I love doing is digging into that with all the folks that I want to be more part of this community, so that we can artistically develop ourselves. And I can be like, oh, cool, that play, I really, really respect it. And it doesn't feel like one for me, but I know 3 other people who are doing work that feels more aligned with that. Let me introduce you to them. And if you know anyone, as you're getting to know me, who's more right for something that I might be into, let me know. It's something I really had to think about in terms of rejection letters for playwrights. Like when again, I've been reading scripts forever, so many scripts, and there's so few slots, even when I was at the agencies trying to put plays in different theaters where it's not just the couple that your one theater has, even then they're limited slots, right? So I always had to say no to a lot of plays. And that was always really, really heartbreaking. And it was really hard because there were some plays that I loved. And I was like, I have to say no to this thing. That's terrible. I don't want to say no to this thing. I love it. But part of it is that, again, I really believe that theater is a landscape, and no one theater is ever going to be able to do every great play. No one theater is ever going to be able to do every kind of theater, every kind of work. So I think we really just need to be better connected to one another and see each other as resources and create more of a symbiosis, so that the work that's out there gets connected to where it should be. And that doesn't mean that it's not good because it's not with the person you're sending it to. It just means that there are a lot of different areas that have different strengths and different like ways of pulling a project in. And we want it to be supported in the best possible way. I can't tell you how many times I've read plays that I'm like, this thing is brilliant, and the place I'm at right now won't be able to do it justice the way that it could be done. And therefore, I think it needs to go to another space. And when I'm able to, I'll relay more information about where it could go and like try to make connections for sure. I think that's part of our responsibility, but sometimes I can't. And then it's really, and that's just because of time and whatever. And that hurts, because I know some of those artists really work so hard on this thing, and it's seen sometimes as like an acceptance or a rejection. And that feels so much less rich than any of those plays that I might be able to say yes or no to,
Ooh, that's good. That's good. That's it. I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. Wrapping up. In the spirit of lightheartedness and fun, Natasha, what are some of your favorite things? And also in the spirit of getting to know you just a tiny bit better, what are some of your favorite things? Just your favorite city, your favorite food, your favorite
Ooh, my favorite food is all Indian food. It's just the best food. And also, I'm getting married in a couple of months, and I just had a wedding tasting. And our chef is this guy who does like hipster Indian food, and it's so good. And I dream about it nightly. Of chickens. I think chickens are ridiculous, and they're like dinosaurs that got left over, and they just run around, and we think they're silly, and they're little dinosaurs. I love it. I love running after them and trying to catch them. I'm very good at this. It's a weird skill. I love traveling. I miss traveling so much, like internationally, to really drop yourself into another world. And I love traveling in a way where it's not like hopping to a lot of different places, but spending time in a place that you get to sort of understand the local vibes of it. Like I like knowing what everyone's favorite coffee shop is in the area.
Totally. Yep.
Or like, what's the weird park that everyone hangs out at, even though there's no like pretty, I don't know, landmark right there.
Right. Yeah.
And spending time there is my favorite. And I really missed out with the pandemic and everything, but hopefully soon.
Natasha, I like to wrap these conversations up with 3 questions. The first one being, what does it mean to you to be celebrated?
Oh, it means community. It means that thing that I wanted since I was younger, and not just in terms of celebrating me, just the idea that you're doing this and the idea of celebration, the idea of seeing what everyone's working on and acknowledging it and appreciating it is like, I mean, anyone caring about what we're each doing, that's what I missed as a kid and what I've been chasing, and here it is.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. What or who do you celebrate?
Who do I celebrate? My God, I feel like I celebrate anyone who is trying to ask a question that is hard, a question that's not easy, a question that, and not that it's not easy because the answer might be attacked, but a question that like you genuinely don't know the answer to. Questions that have that mystery in them, have that uncertainty. That's what feels the truest to me in the world, because I find it really hard to be like, I don't know, to say that I know the extremes of anything, because it feels always, I guess this is my experience, caught in that tension within. It's unsettling, but it feels human. And so folks who are really digging into that, especially with an artistic lens. I mean, artists are my favorite people, just so visionary and bringing us into what we need the next like version of our world to be. I mean, you're all leading us there.
God, I love that. And thank you for that. And finally, Natasha, what do you do to celebrate you?
Me, I don't know if I have a good answer to that one. I don't know. I mean, literally my fiance is moving us into a new apartment as we speak. And so just like being able to lounge in this space and, read a script, maybe even a book on a new couch sounds incredible. Being able to spend time with friends and joke and be silly, and then like for that to cycle into some deep meaningful questions, that's what I live for, especially it's sort of like around a fire, being able to spend time with people in a way where all the performance has been shed because I believe so deeply in crafted performance. I equally love the like complete stripping of all of that artifice into just being with the people that you can do that with.
Natasha, that is so good. That is so good. That resonates so deeply for me. I love that. Thank you for that. It is very clear. I hope it's very clear that I celebrate you. I'm so grateful for you, Natasha. This conversation has reminded me of why I felt what I felt when I first met you. This deep passion for artists. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for your the work that you have put in and that you continue to put in, and for your incredible journey. And just know that we see you, we love you. I love you, Natasha. I'm just so glad that we exist at the same time, and we got your back. We got your back.
Really, Appreciate that. And thank you for doing this, Ellie. This is such a beautiful way to hold all of us together and to lift us up. This is really special. And
Thank
like
you. Thank you.
you're doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. I feel so good. It's an honor for me. Thank you, sister. Talk to you later. Have a good day. Enjoy your new apartment. And congratulations on the upcoming nuptials.
Oh, thanks. Take care. Bye.